The hunters hung the dead human warship from chains the width of a man's body, point down, like a knife driven into the dark above their world. They called the place the Boneyard. It was not a graveyard, the way soft species kept graveyards. It was a wall, a floating cliff of killed ships, 4,000 of them, strung in rows across 19 kilometers of empty sky above the hunter homeworld of Kasar Deep. Each hull was a trophy. Each trophy was a story the hunters told their young. This one fought for 90 days. This one begged. This one ran, and we caught it anyway. The chains were not to hold the ships. The ships were dead. The chains were to make sure everyone who looked up would understand that nothing the hunters caught ever fell on its own. It was placed there. It was hung. It was owned. The newest trophy had no name carved under it yet, because the carvers had not finished arguing about what to call it. It was a human ship. That much they knew. Long and gray and scorched along one flank, 290 meters from prow to broken stern, drifting in dead-stick silence when the hunter pickets found it 9 days out from Kasar Deep. No power signature, no heat, no reply to any hail on any band. The fusion plants were cold, the reactor wells red as empty pits. When the boarding crews cut their way in through the dorsal lock, they found corridors furred with frost and air that had not moved in a very long time. The hunters had a word for a ship like that. They called it Gakra. It meant, roughly, a kill already made, a thing you did not have to fight, only collect. So, they collected it. Field Master Soren Vale led the tow. He had hung 211 ships on the Boneyard wall across his career, and he was proud of every chain. He stood on the bridge of his hunting cruiser, the Long Patience, and watched his crews lash the dead human hull into the harness with a craftsman's care. He did not hurry. Hurrying was for species that feared the dark. Vale feared nothing. He had spent his whole life proving that the galaxy was a wall, and the hunters were the ones who hung things on it. The tow took 6 days. The human ship came quietly. It rolled a little in the harness, slow and patient, the way a heavy thing rolls when nothing inside it is awake to object. Vale's scanmaster ran the hull 11 separate times on the way home and reported the same numbers every time. No power, no life, no threat. The reactor wells were dry. The cryo bay, if the ship had one, read as cold as the void around it. Cold. That was the word that mattered. The hunters knew cold. Cold was how you knew a thing was finished. The boarding of the dead human ship, 9 days out from Kasar Deep, had gone exactly the way such boardings always went, which was to say, it had gone perfectly, which was to say, nobody who walked those frozen corridors had any reason at all to be suspicious, which was, in the end, the whole point. The lead boarder had been a veteran named Koru, a hull cracker of 40 years, who had walked the insides of 300 dead ships and knew the smell of a true kill the way a baker knows the smell of true bread. He had cut through the dorsal lock and stood in the human corridor, with his breath fogging in the frozen air and his lamp throwing long shadows down a passage furred white with the frost of years. And he had felt the thing a hunter felt in a true kill, the deep certainty of emptiness, the knowing that nothing here would ever move again. He had reported it up to the Long Patience in the flat, satisfied voice of a man confirming the obvious. Dead, he had said. Dead all through. Cold as the void. Whatever this was, it died a long time ago. He had been standing, when he said it, 40 meters from the cryopod. He had not gone to the cryopod because the scans said the cryo bay was cold and empty, and a hull cracker of 40 years does not waste his air walking to a place the scans have already cleared. He had stood in the frozen corridor and trusted the numbers, the way every hunter trusted the numbers, the way Esh would trust them 11 times over the days that followed, and the numbers had lied to all of them, perfectly, because Aldous Marsh had built the lie 11 years before with exactly this hull cracker and exactly these scans in mind. He had cooled the cryo bay to read as void. He had wrapped its real warmth in a shell of cold the scans could not see past. He had let the frost grow in the corridors like a beard on a dead man. Real frost, true cold, An honest emptiness laid over the one warm sealed chamber where the old man slept, so that everything a boarder saw and smelled and trusted was true, every bit of it, except the one thing that mattered, which was hidden under all that truth like a stone under snow. It was the most patient deception ever worked on the hunters of Kasar Deep, and its genius was that it told almost no lies at all. The ship really was cold. The corridors really were dead. The reactor wells really did read as dry, because Marsh had banked the mass behind a cold shell the same way he had banked himself. A hunter looking for a lie would have found only truth, layer on layer of true death, and never once thought to ask whether one small chamber, deep in the center of all that honest cold, might be the single warm thing the truth was built to hide. Korug walked out of the dead ship satisfied. He sealed the lock behind him. He told his fieldmaster it was a clean kill, a good trophy, well worth the chains, and then he went home with the rest of the fleet, to the festival, to the halls, and he stood in his war paint at the observation ring with 10,000 others and looked up at the dead ship he had cleared with his own hands, and he was looking right at it, proud, certain, when the cryopod hissed. He would think about the 40 meters for the rest of his life. The 40 meters between where he had stood and where the old man had slept. He would lie awake and walk them, in his mind, again and again, the 40 meters he had not walked because the numbers said he did not need to, and he would understand, slowly, over years, that the 40 meters had never been a distance. They had been a test, the hunter's whole certainty, measured out in 40 meters of frozen corridor, and they had failed it standing still, by trusting the very numbers a patient old man had spent 11 years teaching to lie. They hung it on the wall on the morning of the festival. The hunters of Kasar Deep held a festival every 40 years to count their kills. It was the great gathering of the clans. 240 hunting cruisers came home for it, and the homeworld's 3 moons filled with ships, and the lords of every clan walked the boneyard wall in their war paint, to look up at the trophies and remember that they were the ones who hung things. The new human ship was the centerpiece, the freshest kill. Vale's kill. They hung it dead in the center of the wall, point down, and 10,000 hunters stood on the observation rings of the orbital halls and looked up at it and made the low rolling sound in their throats that meant pride. Vale stood at the front of them all. He had earned the place. He looked up at the gray human hull turning slowly on its chains, and he felt the thing he had felt 211 times before, the thing that was the whole point of being a hunter. He felt ownership. He looked at the dead ship and he knew, all the way down, that it was his. He was looking right at it when the cryopod hissed. It was a small sound. It traveled through the chains, up the great spans of metal, into the listening posts of the boneyard, and across the open channels every clan kept open during the festival so they could share the moment of pride. A hiss. A long, slow, deliberate exhale of pressure equalizing. The sound a sealed thing makes when it decides, at last, to open. 10,000 hunters went still. Vale's scanmaster, in the listening hall behind him, leaned over her station and said a single word into the open channel, and her voice did not sound proud anymore. It sounded confused, which on a hunter sounds almost the same as afraid. "Pressure," she said. "There's pressure inside the kill." There should not have been pressure inside the kill. A dead ship holds no air. A dead ship is open to the void at 100 seams. The hunters had cut their way in through the dorsal lock and found frost and silence, and nothing that breathed. 11 scans. No power, no heat, no life. And yet, somewhere deep in the gray human hull, hanging point down on the boneyard wall, a sealed chamber that had read as cold and empty for 6 days of towing and 9 days of drifting, was now, on its own, slowly and deliberately, building pressure. Warming, cycling, waking. The hiss stopped. For 3 seconds the open channels carried nothing but the breathing of 10,000 hunters who had forgotten, for the first time in their lives, that they were the ones who hung things on walls. Then, from the dead ship, a light came on. It was a single light, deep inside the hull, in a chamber the boarding crews had never reached, because the boarding crews had stopped looking the moment the scans said empty. The light was a soft amber. It glowed through a frosted port no wider than a hunter's hand, and it was the warm, steady color of something that had been waiting a long time for exactly this, and was in no hurry at all now that it had come. Inside that light, behind that frosted port, in a cradle of gel and cold, the hunter's scans had been built to read as death. A human being opened his eyes. His name was Aldous Marsh. He was 63 years old. He had been asleep for 11 years, and he had set the pod to wake him for one reason and one reason only, and the reason had just hung him point down in the center of an enemy wall and called 10,000 of its kind to come and look. Marsh lay still in the gel and let his eyes adjust to the amber light. He did not gasp. He did not thrash. Men who wake well from the long cold do not waste the air. He took one slow breath, and then another, and he listened to the small ticking sounds of his ship coming back around him, the sounds he had fallen asleep to 11 years before, and he smiled, just a little, in the dark. "There you are," he said. He was not talking to the hunters. He was talking to the ship. "I told you they'd come and get us." He had told the ship a great many things, 11 years ago, in the long quiet before he closed the pod. He had told it about the colony at Brennan's Drift, and the 11,000 people who had lived there, and what the hunters had done to them on a clear morning while the children were at the water. He had told it that he was old and slow and the only one of the old crew still breathing, and that he could not chase the hunters across the dark the way a younger man might. He did not have the years, so he had done the patient thing instead. He had cooled the ship until it read as dead. He had stripped its signature down to nothing. He had let the reactor wells go dark and hidden the real ones deep, where no hunter scan would think to look. And then he had set the ship adrift in a place the hunters were sure to find it, with a single instruction wired into the pod, an instruction the hunters had carried home with their own chains and hung on their own wall in front of their own clans on the one night of the century when every hunter who mattered would be standing in front of it. "Wake me when we are home." Marsh reached up in the amber dark and laid one steady old hand against the inside of the frosted port. Beyond it, far beyond it, 10,000 hunters were standing in their war paint, looking up. "Good," he said. "You're all here." And the ship, which the hunters had named Gakra, a kill already made, began, very quietly, to wake the rest of the way up. Field Master Soren Vale did not move when the light came on. Hunters did not flinch. Flinching was a thing prey did, but behind his stillness, in the part of his mind he never showed the clans, something cold and unfamiliar uncoiled, and he did not have a word for it, because his people had spent 10,000 years making sure they never needed one. He turned to his scan master without raising his voice. "Read it again." "I have read it 11 times, Field Master." Her name was Esh, and she was the best reader on the long patience, and her hands were steady, but her crest had flattened. Every read said dead. The wells are dry. The plants are cold. There is no power signature. "And the light?" "The light is real," Esh said quietly. "And now there are two." There were two. While she spoke, a second amber port had warmed deep in the human hull, a third of the way down its length, then a fourth, somewhere near the broken stern. They came on slowly, the way old lamps come on, with no flare and no announcement, and each one was the warm, patient color of a thing that had decided the waiting was over. In the great observation halls above Kasser Deep, 10,000 hunters watched the dead ship light its own windows from the inside, and the low, rolling sound of pride had stopped completely, and nobody had told it to stop. It had simply stopped, the way a sound stops in a room when something walks in that should not be able to walk. Vale keyed the festival channel. Every clan lord was on it. He kept his voice flat. "Lords, the human kill is showing power. I am sending a boarding flight to silence it. This is nothing. A dead ship's batteries waking. We have all seen it." They had all seen it. Sometimes a killed hull held a charge in some deep cell and a light came on a year later. A ghost of a thing, and you sent a crew to cut the cell and the light went out. It happened. It was nothing. So Vale told himself it was nothing, and he sent the flight, because that was the thing a field master did, and somewhere far down in the cold, unfamiliar place in his mind, he was very glad to have a thing to do. 6 hunting skiffs broke from the orbital halls and burned toward the boneyard wall. Vale watched them go on his screen, small hard sparks crossing the dark toward the gray hull turning on its chains. He had flown that approach 211 times. Cut the cell, kill the light, hang the carver's name. It was the oldest work there was. The skiffs were 4 kilometers out when the human ship spoke. It did not speak in any hunter tongue. It spoke on every band at once, in a flat, patient human voice, an old man's voice, unhurried, almost kind, and it spoke in the trade cant every species in that arm of the galaxy understood, because every species in that arm had needed, at some point, to ask the hunters for mercy, and learn there was none. "This is the patrol vessel Last Light of Brennan," the voice said. "Out of the human colony you destroyed at the system you have catalogued as the 81st kill of Field Master Soren Vale. There were 11,040 people living there. You hung their ship on your wall. I have been asleep inside it for 11 years, waiting for you to bring me home. Thank you. You saved me a very long trip." In the observation halls, 10,000 hunters heard the name of one of their own, spoken by a dead ship, and the cold thing without a word spread out among them, crest by crest by crest. Vale's jaw did not move, but his scan master saw his hand close on the rail. "The 81st, Esh said softly. Every kill had a number. Every number had a name. She did not have to look it up. Vale had told the story of the 81st kill at 3 festivals. A soft world, a water world. The hunting had been easy and the trophy had hung well. He had been proud of it. "Silence that ship," Vale said. The 6 skiffs closed the last 4 kilometers, their gun crews armed. The human hull hung point down before them, lighting more windows, slow and warm and unbothered, a long gray shape against the stars, with chains the width of a man's body holding it in place. And then the chains came off. They did not break. Breaking is violent and loud and leaves an edge. These simply opened. Every shackle on the human hull released in the same quarter second, all at once, clean, as though they had never been locked at all, as though the ship had been wearing them the way a patient man wears a coat he intends to take off the moment the room gets warm. 19 kilometers of boneyard wall shuddered as the load redistributed. 4,000 trophy hulls swayed on their chains. The human ship did not sway. It turned, slow and deliberate, prow coming up off the point-down hang, the long gray body rotating in the dark until it lay level, facing in, facing the homeworld, facing the halls where 10,000 hunters stood in their war paint and watched a kill they had made stand up off their own wall. "Field Master," Esh said. The wells just lit. The reactor wells that had read as dry pits for 15 days were not dry. They had never been dry. The numbers that climbed her screen now were numbers she did not at first believe, and then believed and wished she had not. The human ship had been carrying its full reactor mass the entire time, banked and shielded and cold, every gram of it, dressed up as death so completely that 11 scans had walked right past it. It had let them tow it. It had let them chain it. It had let them stand its enemies in rows in front of it on the one night of the century when they were all in one place. And now it was warm. The 6 skiffs fired first. Vale would say so afterward, to the clan court, with what was left of his voice. The hunters fired first. He wanted that on the record, because it was the only part of the night that went the way a hunter expected. The lead skiff's gun crew put a full rack of kinetic lances into the human hull at point-blank range. The killing shot, the cut-the-cell shot, the shot that ended ghost lights 200 times before. The lances struck a shield the scans had also failed to find, and stopped, and fell away as slag, and the human ship did not so much as turn its head. "That," said the old man's voice, conversational, across every band, was the part where you find out which of us is the kill. The Last Light of Brennan fired once. It was not a broadside. Marsh had no broadside to give. Not anymore. not with one old man aboard and a ship he had nursed alone for 11 cold years. He had one main gun, a spinal weapon that ran the whole length of the keel, and he had spent those 11 years keeping it perfect while everything else aged around him. He had cooled it. He had cleaned it. He had told it the names of the people from Brennan's Drift, all 11,040 of them, in the long dark, because a man alone needs something to say, and those were the words he had. He fired it now, level, into the lead skiff, and the lead skiff was simply not there anymore. There was no wreck. There was no spinning hull. There was a line of light a kilometer long, and then there was empty space where a hunting skiff and its crew had been, and the line of light went on, past where the skiff had been, and touched the second skiff, and the second skiff was also gone. One shot, 2 skiffs. The beam dimmed and faded, and the dark came back, and the 4 remaining skiffs sat in it, very still, the way a thing sits still when it has just understood, all at once and far too late, that it is not the hunter in the room. In the observation halls, 10,000 hunters made no sound at all. Vale stood at the front of them. He had hung 211 ships on the wall. He looked at the gray human hull turning level against the stars, lighting its windows one by one, and he reached for the word his people did not have, and for the first time in his long, proud life, he found that he needed it and it was not there. His scan master found it for him. She was young, and she had read the human hull 11 times and trusted the numbers, and now the numbers had betrayed her in front of the clans, and that does something to a reader. She looked at her screen, at the 4 cold skiffs and the line of dead light, and the warm, patient ship that had let itself be chained, and she said the word her people had spent 10,000 years not needing, and she said it on the open channel by accident, because she had stopped being able to keep things behind her teeth. "It was hunting us," Esh said. "The whole time. We didn't catch it. It let us carry it home." The word for that, in the hunter tongue, did not exist, so she had used the human one. She had heard it in the trade cant, in the long lists of things soft species said when the hunters came, and she had filed it away the way a reader files everything, never thinking she would need it. Bait. The human ship had been bait, and the hunters had hung it on their wall. Aldous Marsh, 63 years old, climbed out of the cryopod on legs 11 years stiff and stood for a moment with one hand on the cold rim, letting the blood remember how to move. The amber light filled the small chamber. Around him the last light of Brennan ticked and warmed and woke, system by system, in the order he had taught it, the order that did not waste a single watt before it was needed. He walked, slowly, the careful walk of an old man on a ship he had not stood up in for over a decade, to the forward port, and he looked out at the wall. He had not seen it before. He had been asleep for the tow. He had set the pod to wake him only when the ship's own sensors confirmed it was deep inside an enemy formation, surrounded, home, and the ship had judged that moment well, and now Marsh stood at the port and saw for the first time what he had let them do. 4,000 ships, 19 kilometers of wall, hull after hull after hull, chained point down, scorched and broken and hung as trophies, a cliff of the killed strung across the sky of the world that had killed them. He had known the hunters kept trophies. Everyone in that arm of the galaxy knew. But knowing a thing and standing inside it, level with it, looking down the long rows of the dead in the cold festival light, were not the same, and Marsh stood at the port for a long moment and said nothing at all. Then he found, 3 rows down and a kilometer to port, a ship he knew. It was small. It had been a colony tender, unarmed, the kind of ship a waterworld used to ferry families between the islands. It had no business on a wall of war trophies. It had no guns, and it had never fired one, and it was hung there anyway, chained point down with the rest, because the hunters did not distinguish between a warship and a ferry full of children. A kill was a kill, a trophy was a trophy. They had taken the tinder at Brennan's Drift on the clear morning, while the children were at the water, and they had hung it on their wall, and they had carved a number under it, and the number was a part of the story they told their young. Marsh looked at the tinder for a long time. "All right," he said, very quietly, To the ship, to himself, to the 11,040 names he had carried through the cold. All right, let's get them down. He turned from the port. The careful old man walk was gone now. There was nothing wrong with his legs that mattered anymore. He crossed the chamber to the command station he had stripped and hidden and kept perfect for 11 years, and he sat down in the worn seat that still held the shape of him, and he laid his hands on the controls, and the last light of Brennan came fully awake around him, every window amber, the spinal gun warm, the cold reactor mass running hot and hidden no longer. On his screen, the 4 surviving skiffs were finally moving, scattering, running for the cover of the orbital halls, calling for help on every band. Behind them the homeworld of Kasar Deep turned slow and blue-green, 3 moons bright around it, 240 hunting cruisers docked at its halls for the festival, 10,000 hunters standing in their war paint at the observation rings, all of them, every clan, every lord, gathered in one place on the one night of the century, exactly as the hunters had gathered them, exactly where Marsh had needed them to be. He had not chosen the festival, the hunters had. He had only made himself look like a kill worth hanging at the center of it. They had done the rest. They had carried him home and called their whole world to come and look, and now their whole world was looking, and there was an old man inside the kill with 1 perfect gun and 11 years of patience and a list of names a colony tender long. Field Master Vale, the old man's voice said, on every band, flat and patient and addressed by name. You are the one who hung us, so you are the one I'll talk to. Everyone else can listen. In the great hall, 10,000 hunters turned, as one, to look at Soren Vale. Vale stepped forward to his station. His crest had risen again. A hunter does not stay afraid. Fear is a tide, and it goes back out, and pride comes back in behind it. And the pride that came back into Soren Vale now was the oldest and hardest thing in him. He had killed worlds. He had hung 4,000 ships. He would not be lectured by a single old man in a single ship, however clever the trap, however cold the wells had read. Human, Vale said, and his voice filled the halls, because he wanted 10,000 hunters to hear him be unafraid. You are one ship. We are a world. We are 240 cruisers and 10,000 hunters and a wall of 4,000 kills, and you are a single old creature who could not even die when we shot you. You have 1 gun. We have a sky full of them. You think you have trapped us. You have only chosen where to hang. There was a pause on the channel. When the old man's voice came back, it was not angry. That was the part Vale would remember longest. Afterward, in the dark, in whatever was left to him, the old man was not angry. The old man sounded almost gentle, the way a man sounds when the thing he is about to do has already been decided for a very long time, and there is no heat left in it. Only the doing. I know exactly how many of you there are, Aldous Marsh said. I counted you on the way in. 240 cruisers. 10,000 of you in the halls. You're all here. That was the only thing I was ever waiting for. Then you will die surrounded, Vale said. No, the old man said. I'll die last. There's a difference, and you're about to spend the rest of the night learning it. And the last light of Brennan, 1 ship, 1 gun, 1 old man, turned its prow toward the homeworld of Kasar Deep and the festival of 240 cruisers, and began, without any hurry at all, to move. The 240 cruisers came off their docks all at once, and the sky above Kasar Deep filled with hunters. It was a magnificent thing to see, if you were a hunter, and 10,000 of them watched it from the halls with the pride coming back, because this was the part they understood. This was a war launch. 240 hunting cruisers, the pride of every clan, breaking dock in a storm of drive light, and forming up in the old killing wedges their grandfathers had cut into 100 soft worlds. Each cruiser was 4 times the length of the human ship. Each carried gun racks that could open a colony dome. They had killed Brennan's Drift in a single morning, all 11,040, between the dawn meal and the noon tide, and they had not lost a single ship doing it, and they remembered. Fieldmaster Vale took the center of the wedge in the long patience. He was where a fieldmaster belonged, at the heart of the kill, and the cold thing without a word had gone all the way back out of him now, and there was only the work. One ship, one gun. It did not matter how clever the trap had been. A trap is sprung once. After that it is only a fight, and a fight between one ship and 240 was not a fight at all. It was arithmetic. Vale had done this arithmetic his whole life, and it had never once failed him. "Close and kill," he said, and 240 cruisers leaned into their drives and came on. Aldous Marsh watched them come on his screen, the great wedge filling the dark, and he did a thing the hunters did not expect and would not understand until it was much too late. He stopped moving. The last light of Brennan came to a dead halt in the center of the sky above Cassar Deep, level, prow out, and simply waited, one gray ship hanging motionless, while 240 cruisers bore down on it from every angle at once. To the hunters it looked like surrender. It looked like an old creature who had spent his one trick and now had nothing left but to be still and be killed. Esh, reading from the halls, saw the human ship stop and felt her crest lift in spite of herself, because a still target was a dead target, and the numbers, for the first time that night, were on the hunter's side again. She was wrong. The human ship had not stopped because it had run out of moves. It had stopped because Aldous Marsh needed it perfectly still to do what he was about to do, and he had only one gun, and a man with one gun does not waste a single shot by firing it while he drifts. The spinal weapon of the last light of Brennan was not a fast gun. That was the thing the hunters did not know, and the thing that would have saved them if they had known it. It took 11 seconds to cycle between shots. 11 seconds was an eternity in a fight against 240 cruisers. A faster ship would have spread its fire, traded shots, danced, and died, because no shield holds against 240 gun racks for long. Marsh did not intend to trade. Marsh intended to make every one of those 11-second intervals count for exactly one cruiser, and to never ever miss. And he had spent 11 cold years teaching the gun and himself to do precisely that. The first cruiser to enter killing range was a clan ship called the Red Tide. It was 900 meters long. It had hung 40 trophies of its own. Its gun crews were the finest of their clan, and they had a clear shot at a motionless human hull, and they took it, the full rack, and the rack struck the human shield and slagged and fell away, and in the half-second, the gun crew of the Red Tide spent not understanding why their kill was still there. The spinal weapon of the last light of Brennan put a line of light through the Red Tide's keel from prow to stern. The Red Tide came apart in 3 pieces. The hunters watched it go, and the pride faltered, just slightly, just at the edges. The hunters of Cassar Deep had a saying, older than the wall itself, older than the festival, older than anyone living could remember the first speaking of it. They said, "The dark belongs to the one who moves fastest in it." It was carved over the gate of every clan hall. It was the first thing a hunter young was taught, and the last thing a hunter old believed. The whole of their war ran on it. You found the prey, you ran it down, you finished it before it could turn. Speed was virtue. Speed was honor. Speed was the difference between the hunter and the hung. Aldous Marsh had read that saying once, 11 years before, in a captured hunter manual. The Colony Defense Office had pulled off a downed skiff in the early days, before the early days became the only days. He had read it, and he had understood, slowly, the way an old engineer understands a machine, that it was not a strength, it was a whole. A whole people had built their entire idea of war on motion, and a whole people had therefore never once, in 10,000 years, learned what to do against a thing that would not move. So he had built a thing that would not move. That was the whole of his plan, when you took the cold and the sleep and the wall and the bait away. A patient gun on a patient ship, run by the most patient creature the galaxy had ever cooled into a box, and the one rule he had wired into the heart of it, the rule he had repeated to himself through 11 years of dark, like a prayer he did not believe in: do not chase. Whatever happens, whatever they do not chase. Let them come. Let them spend their speed against a thing that is simply, perfectly, immovably still, and watch what it does to a people who have never seen stillness win. Now, In the dawn-dark sky above Kassar Deep, he watched it do exactly that. The cruiser Stonethroat came at him fastest of all. Its captain was a young clan lord named Thrennic, who had only 9 trophies but a great hunger for more, and Thrennic saw a still target and his blood sang the old song, "The dark belongs to the one who moves fastest," and he moved fastest. He poured every gram of his drive into one screaming pass, meaning to cross the human ship's bow at a speed no gun could track, and rake it open down the length of its hull. It was a beautiful run. The old clan lords in the halls saw it, and felt the pride flicker back, because this was a hunter's run. This was the dark belonging to the fastest. This was the thing they were. Marsh did not track him. Marsh did not need to. He had been watching the Stonethroat build that run for 40 seconds, and he had simply aimed his immovable gun at the place the speed would put it, and waited, and when the Stonethroat crossed that place at a speed no gun could track, the gun did not have to track it. The line of light was already there. The Stonethroat ran into it at full burn, and came apart along its whole length, and the pieces kept going, scattering forward at the speed of the run that killed it, because that was the thing about speed. It did not stop being yours just because you had died. Thrennic's run, the most beautiful hunter's run of the festival, ended as a spray of burning metal thrown forward into the dark by its own glorious speed. And in the halls, the pride flickered out again, because the watching hunters had just seen the oldest virtue of their people, speed, honor, the dark belonging to the fastest, fed into a still gun and turned into the manner of its own death. 11 seconds. The second cruiser was the Black Crest, and Marsh took it through the drive section, and it did not come apart. It simply stopped, drifting dark and dead, its crew alive inside it, and going nowhere, and that was deliberate too. Marsh had thought a great deal, in the cold, about what he wanted and what he did not want. He did not want a slaughter. He had told himself that, many times, in the long dark, with the names. He was not a hunter. He would not become one to punish them for being one. But he wanted the wall down, and he wanted Vale, and he wanted 10,000 hunters to stand in their halls and watch their certainty come apart one cruiser at a time, and learn, in their own bodies, the thing the people of Brennan's Drift had learned on a clear morning at the water. He wanted them to feel it. 11 seconds. The third cruiser. The fourth. Marsh did not move the ship. He pivoted it, only, on its center, the long gray hull rotating a few degrees between shots to bring the spinal gun to bear on the next target, and the hunters, who had built their whole war on motion and the chase and running prey to ground, threw themselves at a thing that would not run, that would not even dodge, that simply turned, and fired, and turned, and fired, and every turn was a cruiser, and every fire was a clan that would not come home from the festival. In the halls, the watching stopped being pride and became something else. Esh did not have the word for that one either. It was the thing a hunter felt when it discovered it was on the wrong side of the chase, and her people did not have a word for it, because they had spent 10,000 years making certain they were never the ones being hunted, and so they had never needed to name the way it felt. Vale felt it and refused it. "It cannot fire fast," he said into the wedge. "Watch it. It takes time between shots. Flood it. Get inside the cycle. 20 ships at once, and the shield cannot hold, and between its shots it is blind. Press it. Press it now." It was good tactics. It was in fact exactly right, and if the hunters had had a faster enemy, it would have worked. 20 cruisers broke from the wedge and came at the last light of Brennan from 20 angles at once, gun racks flooding the human shield, and the shield groaned and dimmed, and Esh saw it dim and called it out, and for the span of one 11-second cycle, the hunters were winning. Then the cycle ended, and Marsh fired, and he did not fire at the nearest cruiser. He fired at the one whose loss would break the wedge's geometry, the keystone ship, the one Vale had placed to anchor the flood, and the line of light took it through the spine, and the flood lost its shape, and the 20 cruisers that had been a perfect closing net were suddenly 20 ships in each other's way, and in the 11 seconds it took the gun to cycle again, 4 of them collided trying to hold a formation that no longer had a center. Marsh fired. Another cruiser gone. Esh, reading from the halls, stopped calling out the kills. She had called the first 40. It was her duty. The readers fed the clans the shape of a battle, so the lords could feel it from the safety of the halls. But somewhere past the 40th cruiser she had stopped, because she had realized that what she was reading aloud was not the shape of a battle the hunters were fighting. It was the shape of a battle being done to them, in order, at a pace, by a thing that was not in any hurry to finish, and to read it aloud was to narrate her own people's undoing to their faces. So she stopped, and the lords did not order her to continue, because they had heard the same thing in the silence she had heard in the numbers, and they did not want it said out loud any more than she wanted to say it. She kept reading, though, privately, to herself, because she was a reader, and a reader reads, even when what she is reading is the end of everything she believed. And in the reading, alone at her station while 10,000 hunters watched the sky go dark with their own dead, Esh saw a thing the lords did not see, a thing the gun crews dying in the wedge did not see, a thing that frightened her more than the gun. The human ship was not firing as fast as it could. She was certain of it. She had timed the cycle. 11 seconds, shot to shot, all night, regular as a heart. But she had also watched the energy curves, and the energy the human ship banked between shots was more than a single spinal weapon needed, much more, and at first she had thought she was misreading it, and then she had checked, and checked again, and understood. The ship could fire faster, it could fire much faster, it was choosing not to. It was holding to 11 seconds, not because 11 seconds was its limit, but because 11 seconds was the pace the old man wanted, the slow, steady pace of a count, the pace of a man saying a name between each shot, and the ship was pacing its whole annihilation of the hunter fleet to the speed of an old man reading a list. That was the thing that frightened Esh past all the rest. Not that the human could kill them. Anything could kill, given the chance. It was that the human was not even using all of himself to do it. He was killing 240 cruisers and taking down a wall of 4,000 trophies and reading the dead back to life, and he was doing all of it at a leisurely walk, with most of his strength held back, the way a strong man does an easy chore. The hunters had brought everything they had to this night, the festival, the whole fleet, the full weight of the clans, and the human had brought one old creature working at half effort, and the one old creature was winning so easily that he had time to spare for mercy. Esh wrote it down. She did not know why, habit perhaps, or the reader's old need to make a record even of the end. She wrote, "He is not trying, he is not even trying, and we cannot stop him." She would carry that record off the homeworld years later, when she left the hunter's service, when she could no longer stand to read for a people who flinched, and it would become, in the long telling, one of the lines the galaxy remembered best about the night the wall came down. Not the names, though the names came too. Not the falling trophies. This, a single human, working at half his strength, took the whole of the hunters and had effort to spare, and that was when the galaxy stopped being afraid of the hunters of Kesar Deep, and started, very quietly, in the way these things start, being afraid of the humans instead. The thing the hunters had never reckoned with was patience. Their whole culture ran on the chase, on the fast kill, on running a thing down and finishing it before it could turn. They measured a hunter by speed. Marsh was 63 years old, and he had been asleep for 11 years, and he had nursed a single ship alone through the cold dark with nothing to do but wait, and he had become, in that waiting, the most patient thing in the galaxy. He did not need to be fast. He needed to be right, once, every 11 seconds, forever, and he could do that. He had taught himself to do exactly that, because it was the only thing left that he could do, and he had built an entire revenge out of the one ability the hunters had never bothered to respect. 40 cruisers gone. The wedge was not a wedge anymore. It was a brawl, a panic. 200 ships trying to find an angle on a single gray hull that would not run and would not miss, and would not, no matter how many of them died, hurry. "It is one ship," Vale's voice cracked across the wedge now, and 10,000 hunters in the halls heard the crack and went cold. A field master's voice did not crack. "One ship, one gun. There are 200 of us still. Close and kill. Close and kill. They closed. They were brave. The hunters were never anything but brave, and that was the worst of it, that they kept coming, clan after clan, into a fire that took one of them every 11 seconds and never once faltered. They were brave and they were proud, and they died in the order Aldous Marsh chose for them. And from inside the last light of Brennan, an old man watched them come, and pivoted his ship and fired and said, very quietly, between shots, in the cold amber light, the names. He had carried 11,040 names through the dark. He had not told the hunters that. He told the names to the ship, the way he had for 11 years, one at a time, a name between each shot, and it was not a curse, and it was not a prayer. It was a count. He was counting Brennan's drift back, one name per cruiser, and there were enough names to outlast every ship the hunters had, and they both knew it now, the old man and the hunters, that there was no number of cruisers large enough to run out the names. There was a moment, in the long middle of the night, when Fieldmaster Vale tried the one thing left to a hunter who could not win by speed. He tried to win by numbers, in a way that had nothing to do with speed at all. He pulled the surviving cruisers back, out of the gun's easy reach, and he reformed them, not into a wedge, but into a sphere, a shell of 100 ships all around the human at a long range, every gun rack aimed inward, and he gave the order that no hunter had ever needed to give before, because no hunter had ever fought a thing he could not run down. He ordered them to fire all at once, not to close, not to chase, just to stand at range, 100 ships in a shell, and pour everything inward at the same instant, so that no matter how good the shield was, no shield could hold against 100 full gun racks arriving together. It was again exactly the right idea. Vale was not a fool. He had simply spent his whole life with the wrong enemy, and now, at the end, with the right one, his mind kept finding the right answers, a half step too late to matter. 100 cruisers fired inward at once. The sky around the last light of Brennan went white. Esh, reading, saw the human shield take the full weight of 100 gun racks and dim further, dim to almost nothing, and for one shining instant the hunters were winning, truly winning, the shield at the edge of failure, and 100 ships still firing. And then Marsh, who had been waiting for exactly that, who had let the shield dim on purpose because a dim shield draws everything a fleet has and empties its racks all at once, fired his immovable gun not at a ship, but at a point in the shell where 3 cruisers had drifted close together in the firing, and the line of light took all 3, and the shell had a hole in it, and into the half-second of confusion as the shell tried to close the hole, the human ship did the only fast thing it did all night. It did not move. Marsh would not break his own rule, not even then. But the gun, freed for an instant from the discipline of the count, cycled twice in the span it usually cycled once. 2 shots, 2 more gaps blown in the shell, and the shell, which depended on every ship holding its place, came apart the way a thing comes apart when it is built on everyone standing still and one player will not. The 100 cruisers, their racks emptied in the great inward volley, had nothing to fire while they recharged, and the human ship had everything, and in the long minutes it took a hunter gun rack to recharge after a full discharge. Aldous Marsh, working again at his patient half-effort, walked his immovable gun around the broken shell and took the cruisers one at a time, 11 seconds apart, a name between each, until the shell was not a shell, until the 100 was a 50, until Vale, in the long patience, understood that he had just spent the last good idea his people had, and it had bought him nothing but a faster end for 50 more of his clans. "Stop firing," Vale said, at last, into the wedge, into the shell, into the ruin. "All ships, stop firing, stand down, it is over." It was the second thing no hunter had ever done in 10,000 years. The first had been to listen. This was to surrender, though the hunters had no word for that one either, and so the order went out in the only words Vale could find, which were almost an apology, and the 50 surviving cruisers powered down their racks and went still in the dark, and stopped being a fleet, and became only 50 ships full of frightened hunters waiting to find out what a patient old human did to the things he had beaten. And the last light of Brennan, which had not moved from the center of the sky all night, which had let 240 cruisers spend their speed and their numbers and their last good idea against its perfect stillness, sat in the dawn dark and did not fire, and waited for the firing to stop on its own, and when it had, the old man spoke and turned his gun, at last, toward the wall. 100 cruisers gone. The festival channel, which had carried the low-rolling pride of 10,000 hunters at the start of the night, carried something now that no hunter channel had ever carried in 10,000 years. It carried silence, and under the silence, on the open boards the readers kept, it carried a single word, the human word, passed crest to crest through the halls, because the hunters still had no word of their own and needed one badly now. Bait. We were the bait. The whole world was the bait. He did not come to fight a fleet. He came to be hung on our wall, so we would gather, so he could take us all at once. And in the center of the dying wedge, in the long patience, Field Master Soren Vale, who had hung 211 ships, who had killed Brennan's drift between the dawn meal and the noon tide, who had stood at the front of 10,000 hunters and felt the oldest pride there was, looked at his screen, at the gray human ship that would not run, and would not miss, and would not hurry, and finally, fully, against everything 10,000 years had built into his blood, understood what had been done to him. He had not made a kill. He had carried a gun home in his arms, and rocked it to his world, and stood his whole people in front of it, and woken it with his own pride. Human, he said, and his voice did not fill the halls now. It was small. Stop. We can speak. We can pay. Whatever the colony was worth, we will pay it. 10 times. 100. Stop the gun and speak. 11 seconds passed. The last light of Brennan pivoted, level and unhurried, and brought its one perfect gun around to bear on the heart of the broken wedge, on the long patience itself, on the field master at the center of his clans. You can't pay it, the old man said. He still was not angry. There were 11,040 of them. I'm only at 4,010. Sit still, field master. I'll get to you. I want you watching the wall the whole time. And he fired. The shot did not hit the long patience. Vale flinched, and 10,000 hunters in the halls flinched with him, and the line of light passed 100 meters off the long patience's flank, and went on, past the broken wedge, past the dying cruisers, all the way to the boneyard wall. It struck a chain, not a ship, a chain, one of the great shackles the width of a man's body that held a trophy hull point down on the wall, and the chain parted in a spray of light, and a dead human warship that had hung on that wall for 60 years came loose and began, very slowly, to fall. The hunters did not understand. For a moment even Vale did not understand. The human had a clear shot at the field master, at the center of the clans, at the kill that would end the night, and he had spent it on a chain. He's taking down the wall, Esh said, in the halls, and her voice had gone strange. He's not aiming at us. Look. Look where the shots are going. He's cutting the trophies loose. 11 seconds. The gun cycled. Another shot, another chain, another dead ship coming free of the wall and beginning its long, slow fall toward the homeworld's grip. And then another, and another. Aldous Marsh had stopped firing at the cruisers entirely. The cruisers were broken. The wedge was scattered. 200 had become 100, and the 100 had stopped pressing because they had finally, fully, understood that pressing was dying. The fight, such as it was won, and Marsh knew it, and so he had turned his one perfect gun, between the names, onto the wall. He cut the colony tender loose first. He had found it 3 rows down and a kilometer to port, the little unarmed ferry that had carried families between the islands of Brennan's Drift, hung on a wall of warships because a kill was a kill. He cut its chain with a shot he had been saving, and the tender came free and floated, slow and weightless, no longer point down, no longer a trophy, just a small dead ship adrift in the dark above an enemy world. And Marsh, in the cold amber light, said a name, and then another, and then a third, the way he had for 11 years, and let the little ship go. As the wall came down, Marsh found that he knew some of the ships. Not all of them. 4,000 was too many for one old man to know. But the human ships he knew, every one, because the humans of that arm of the galaxy had been few, and a man who had spent his life on a colony patrol had crossed paths with most of them, in better years, before the hunters came. He cut their chains one at a time and named them as they came free. Not the dead aboard. He did not know all those, but the ships, the hulls, the names painted on prows that no hunter had bothered to read, because to a hunter a kill had a number and did not need a name. There was the Harvest Moon, a grain hauler out of a farming world 3 jumps from Brennan's Drift, that had never carried a gun and had been hung on a wall of warships because the hunters did not care to tell the difference. Marsh cut its chain and let it fall. There was the Two Sisters, a survey ship, lost 80 years before, that the human worlds had mourned as a mystery and never found, and here it was, all this time, hung point down on a hunter wall above a world no human had known to look at. Marsh cut its chain and let it fall, and somewhere far away, a record older than he was could finally be closed. There was a warship, a real one, the Endurance, that had died fighting, hung in a place of honor near the center of the wall, because even the hunters could tell a ship that had made them work, and Marsh paused over it longer than the rest, because the Endurance had gone down with all hands buying time for an evacuation that the records said had succeeded, and the people that ship had saved had gone on to build 3 colonies, and one of those colonies had built the patrol vessel that Marsh now sat inside. He owed the Endurance, in a long chain of owing, the very ship he was using to cut it free. He cut its chain last of the human hulls, and named it aloud, and let it fall, and said, quietly, to a ship 80 years dead, thank you, and meant it down to the bone. And there were the ships that were not human at all. That was the thing Marsh had not expected, and it stopped him, for a moment, in the long work of the wall. Not all the trophies were human. The hunters had hung anything they killed, and they had killed for 10,000 years, and the wall held the dead of 100 species. Ships of shapes Marsh had no names for. Hulls grown instead of built, hulls of crystal and of bone and of metals that had no business holding together, all of them killed, all of them hung, all of them point down on the same wall as Brennan's Drift, carved with numbers, walked past by Hunter Young in war paint, turned into the same story. Marsh looked at the alien dead and made a decision he had not planned to make. He cut them loose too. All of them. Every hull on the wall. Human and not. Ferry and warship and grain hauler and the grown crystal ships of species he would never meet. He had come for the human dead, for Brennan's Drift, for his own. But a wall is a wall and a trophy is a trophy, and the thing he had decided in the cold was that nobody would hang on this wall when he was done, and he found, in the doing, that he had not meant only his own nobody. He had meant all of them, the dead of 100 species, hung by the hunters to feel large, and an old man with 1 gun, working at half his strength, gave every one of them back the dignity of falling. It took longer that way. He had known it would. The 50 surviving cruisers sat in the dark and watched a human spend his shots not on them, never on them now, but on the chains of dead aliens that were no concern of his, species he had no debt to and no reason to free, and they did not understand it, and the not understanding was the beginning, for some of them, of the long change that the night would work on the hunters of Kassar Deep. Because a hunter freed nothing, a hunter kept, and here was a thing that had beaten them utterly, that owed them only harm, spending its hard-won victory setting free the dead of strangers, and the hunters watched it and felt, for the first time, the shape of a way of being that was not their own, and could not look away from it. The wall came down, all of it, every species, every hull, 4,000 trophies cut from the sky, 1 patient shot at a time. And across the long year that followed, the dead of 100 worlds fell home, through the skies of Kassar Deep, burning their long bright lines into every dawn, and the hunters looked up at all of them, not just the human dead, but the dead of every species they had ever hung, and there was no clan hall on the homeworld with a window that did not, sooner or later, frame a falling trophy, and no hunter young grew up after that night without asking, at least once, looking up, what was that, and being told the truth, because the old man had left them no story to tell but the truth. Then he cut the rest. It took a long time. There were 4,000 ships on the wall and 19 kilometers of it, and the gun cycled once every 11 seconds, and Marsh did not hurry, because he had never once hurried, because hurrying was the hunter's sickness, and he would not catch it from them even now. Shot by shot, chain by chain, name by name, the boneyard wall came down. The hunters watched it come down and did not fire. That was the strangest part, the part Esh would try and fail to explain to the clan court afterward. The surviving cruisers, 100 of them, with their gun racks full and their crews alive, sat in the dark and watched a single old man in a single ship take their wall apart, and they did not fire, because somewhere in the long dying of the wedge they had stopped being hunters. You cannot be a hunter when you are not the one doing the hunting. They did not have the word for what they were now. They only had the human one, and they did not want it, and so they sat in their cruisers and watched, in a silence 10,000 years deep, while the trophies of every clan came loose from the sky. Vale watched his own kills fall, the 81st, the 40th, the 109th, every number he had carved, every story he had told his young, coming free of the wall and drifting loose, no longer hung, no longer owned, no longer placed. The thing that had made him a hunter, the thing that had made his whole people what they were, was the certainty that nothing they caught ever fell on its own. It was placed, it was hung, it was owned, and one old man was teaching 10,000 hunters, shot by patient shot, that everything falls on its own in the end, even the things you chain to the sky. Why? Vale said. He had not meant to. It came out of him on the open channel, in front of the clans, and he did not care any more. You have won. The fleet is broken. You could end me. Why the wall? They are dead. The ships are dead. The crews are dust. Why spend your shots on chains? The last light of Brennan cut another chain. Another dead ship drifted free. The old man's voice came back. And now, for the first time all night, there was something under the patience. Something Vale had no word for either, and it was not anger. Because you hung them, Marsh said. That was the thing, not the killing. Worlds die. Ships die. I've made my peace with dying. But you took the dead, and you hung them on a wall, and you carved numbers under them, and you walked your children past them in your war paint, and you told them this is what we are. We are the ones who hang things. You didn't just kill Brennan's drift. You made it a trophy. You made 11,040 people into a story you told to feel large. And I have spent 11 years deciding that whatever else happens tonight, that wall comes down. Every ship, every chain, nobody is hanging on it when I'm done. Not the warships, not the ferry, not anyone's dead. The wall comes down, Field Master, and the galaxy will know it came down, and your young will grow up in a sky with nothing hung in it, and they will have to find some other way to feel large. That is the thing I came to do. The fleet was just in the way. He cut another chain. It went on for 2 hours. 2 hours of an old man and one gun, and 19 kilometers of wall, and 100 broken cruisers that could not bring themselves to fire, and the homeworld of Kassar Deep, turning slow and blue-green below it all, 3 moons bright, 10,000 hunters in the halls, watching their whole history come loose from the sky one shot at a time. And as the wall came down, the dead came home. That was the thing Marsh had calculated. In the cold, over 11 years, the thing the hunters could not have known because they did not think the way he thought. The boneyard hung above the homeworld in a high, slow orbit. Cut the chains and the trophies did not fly off into the dark. They fell, slow and weightless and patient, caught in the long arms of the homeworld's pull, and they began the months-long fall toward the atmosphere of Kassar Deep. 4,000 dead ships, 4,000 trophies. Every kill the hunters had ever made, coming down, over the coming year, in slow burning lines across the sky of the world that had killed them, where every hunter on the planet would have to look up and watch them come. The wall would not just come down, it would come home. The hunters had spent 10,000 years making sure the galaxy looked up at their kills. Now the hunters would spend a year looking up at them instead, as they fell, burning, one by one, onto the world that had hung them. Marsh had thought a long time about whether that was a cruel thing. He had decided, in the cold, that it was not cruelty. Cruelty was hanging the dead. This was only giving them back the dignity of falling. He cut the last chain near the end of the second hour. The wall was empty. 19 kilometers of sky where 4,000 trophies had hung, and now nothing, only the chains themselves drifting slack and purposeless, and 4,000 dead ships beginning their long, slow fall toward home. The boneyard of Kasser Deep, the great wall the hunters had built across 10,000 years to remind the galaxy what they were, was gone. It had taken one old man, one ship, one gun, and a patience the hunters had never thought to fear, and it was gone. Aldous Marsh sat in the worn seat in the cold amber light and looked at the empty sky, and for a long moment he said nothing, no name, no shot, nothing. He had not finished the names. He was only at 4,010 of 11,040. He had thought, in the cold, that he would feel something when the wall came down, and he found that he did not feel the thing he had expected. He felt tired. He felt old. He felt the 11 years in his bones and the weight of the names not yet counted, and he understood, sitting there, that there was no number of cruisers and no length of wall that would ever finish the count, because the count was not really a number. It was a man trying to carry 11,040 people, and you cannot put a person down by firing a gun. But the wall was down. That part was real. That part he had done. He turned the ship, level and unhurried, back toward the broken wedge, back toward the long patience, back toward Field Master Soren Vale at the center of his dying clans. "There's one thing left," the old man said, on the open channel, to the Field Master, to the 10,000, and then I'll let you go. In the halls, 10,000 hunters who had watched their entire history come loose from the sky heard a human say he would let them go, and did not believe it, and did not know what to do with not believing it, because the hunters had never in 10,000 years let anything go, and so they did not know, from the inside, what it felt like to be on the other end of that word. Vale sat in the long patience at the center of the ruin of his fleet, 100 cruisers around him, alive, silent, their gun racks full and useless, the wall gone, the trophies falling. His career, his certainty, his whole idea of what his people were, drifting loose in the dark with the slack chains. And one gray human ship, one old man, one gun that had not missed in 2 hours, turning to face him, level and patient, prow out. He was a hunter. He had been a hunter his whole life. He reached, one last time, for the only thing he knew how to be, and he keyed his gun racks, all of them, the full broadside of the long patience, and he aimed them at the human ship, and he prepared to die the one way a hunter could die, firing. "Don't," the old man said. He had seen the gun racks light. Of course he had. He saw everything. He had seen everything all night. "Don't, Vale. I'm not going to kill you. I decided that a long time ago, in the cold. Put the racks down and listen, because what I'm about to do to you is worse than killing you, and you're going to live a very long time inside it." And Field Master Soren Vale, who had nothing left, who had hung 211 ships, and lost a fleet, and a wall, and a world's whole idea of itself, in a single festival night, sat in the center of his dead clans, with his finger on the firing key, and did the thing no hunter had ever done in 10,000 years. He listened. "You're going to live," Aldous Marsh said. "All of you. The 100 ships that are left. The 10,000 in the halls. The whole world below you. You're all going to live, and you're going to grow old, and you're going to die in your beds of old age. And that is the thing I came 11 years and one long sleep to do to you." In the long patience, Field Master Vale took his finger off the firing key, not because he believed it, because he could not for the life of him understand it, and a hunter who does not understand a thing does not fire on it until he does. He had expected death. He had braced for death. He had been ready to die firing, the way his grandfathers died, the way a hunter was supposed to. Living was the one thing he had not braced for, and it landed on him like a chain. "You killed my fleet," Vale said. His voice was hollow. "You took down our wall. You ruined us in front of every clan. And now you let us live. Why? What kind of mercy is that?" "It isn't mercy," the old man said, and his voice was very quiet now, and very old, and very sure. "Mercy is when you spare someone because you've forgiven them. I haven't forgiven you. I'm never going to forgive you. There were 11,040 people at Brennan's Drift, and you killed them between the dawn meal and the noon tide, and hung their ferry on your wall, and I will carry their names until I die, and I have not forgiven you for one of them. This isn't mercy, Fieldmaster. This is the other thing." He let the ship drift, level, prow out, in the center of the broken fleet, and the empty sky, and the slow rain of falling trophies, and he told them what the other thing was. "If I killed you," Marsh said, "you'd be a story. That's what your whole wall was, you know. A way of turning death into a story you got to tell. Kill the human, hang it on the wall, carve the number, tell the young. And if I killed you tonight, that's exactly what I'd be giving you. The hunters of Kassar Deep, who died gloriously, fighting a monster, in the great festival war. Your young would grow up on that story. They'd build a new wall. They'd hang me on it, in their minds, the way you hang everything. And in 1,000 years there'd be a clan of hunters somewhere telling their children about the night the humans came, and how brave you all were, and they'd go out and do it again to some other soft world, by some other water, because that's what a story like that does. It makes the next one easier." He paused. The names ran under his words, silent. 4,010 of 11,040, and Vale could not hear them, but he could feel them somehow, the weight of them, in the old man's patience. "So I'm not going to give you the story," Marsh said. "I'm going to give you the truth instead. Here is the truth, Fieldmaster, and you're going to live a long life inside it, and your young are going to grow up inside it, and the whole galaxy is going to learn it from you. You did not lose to a fleet. You lost to one old man in one broken ship, asleep in a box, whom you towed home with your own chains and hung on your own wall, and woke up with your own pride. You didn't lose a battle. You lost the thing that made you hunters. You found out, in front of every clan, on the one night of the century, that you were never the ones doing the hunting. You were just the only ones who hadn't noticed yet. In the halls, 10,000 hunters heard it, and the word that had passed crest to crest all night, the human word they did not want, settled into them and would not leave. Bait. They had been the bait. The whole world had been the bait. And the thing about that word, the thing Marsh understood and they were only now learning, was that once you knew it about yourself, you could never again be certain you were the hunter. You would look at every easy kill and wonder. You would look at every dead ship and wonder. You would never again feel, all the way down, the one feeling that had made you what you were. "That's the thing I'm taking," Marsh said. "Not your fleet, not your wall. I'm taking your certainty. And I'm leaving you alive to feel it gone, every day, for the rest of your lives, and to teach it to your children, because you'll have to. You'll have to tell them what happened here. And every time you do, the next hunter who hears it will hesitate, just a little, the first time he goes to take an easy kill. He'll wonder if it's a kill or if it's bait. He'll wonder if the dead ship is dead. And that hesitation is going to spread, clan to clan, world to world, generation to generation, until the hunters of Kassar Deep are a people who flinch. That's what I came to make. Not a graveyard, a whole species that flinches. And I'm going to make it out of you, Fieldmaster, by letting you live." Vale sat in the silence of his dead fleet and understood, finally, fully, that the old man was right, and that it was worse than dying, and that he was going to live inside it for a very long time. "There's one more thing," Marsh said, "and then I'm done with you." The last light of Brennan turned, slow and level, away from the long patience, away from the broken fleet, and pointed its prow at the homeworld of Kassar Deep, turning slow and blue-green below, 3 moons bright, the whole watching world. And the old man did the thing he had saved for last, the thing he had decided on, in the cold, 11 years before, when he was still strong enough to be angry, and not yet patient enough to be terrible. He read the names. Not to the ship. Out loud, on every band, on every channel, into every hall and every cruiser and every receiver on the whole homeworld of Kasar Deep, the names of Brennan's Drift, all 11,040 of them, one after another, in an old man's steady voice, slow and clear and unhurried. He had carried them for 11 years. He had counted them between shots, and now he gave them, every one, to the people who had killed them, so that the hunters of Kasar Deep would never again be able to say that Brennan's Drift was a number under a hull on a wall. It took the rest of the night. The hunters could not turn it off. Marsh had seen to that. The names ran on every band at a strength their receivers could not refuse, and so 10,000 hunters in the halls and 100 cruisers in the dark, and a whole world below, sat through the night and listened to an old man read the names of the dead they had made, one at a time, with no anger in his voice at all, which was the worst thing of all, because anger they would have understood. Anger was a hunter's tongue. This was something else. This was a man saying these were people, and you will hear that they were people, and you will never again be able to pretend they were a story. The names of the children came in the middle of the list, because that was the order Marsh read them, the order the colony rolls had kept. Families together, and the children's names were short, and there were a great many of them, and the hunters of Kasar Deep, who had killed Brennan's Drift on a clear morning while the children were at the water, sat in their war paint and listened to the names of the children they had killed, one after another, and 10,000 years of certainty died in them name by name. Vale listened to all of it. He had killed the world. It was his to hear. He sat in the long patience at the center of the ruin he had made, and he listened to the 11,040 names, and somewhere in the long middle of it, in the children, he stopped being a field master, and he stopped being a hunter, and he became only an old creature who had done a terrible thing and was being made, for the first time in his life, to know it. The names ended near dawn. Aldous Marsh read the last one, a woman's name, an old woman, the colony's eldest, and then he stopped, and the channels were silent, and the homeworld of Kasar Deep turned slow and blue-green below the ruin of its fleet, and the first of the falling trophies entered the high atmosphere and burned a long bright line across the dawn sky for the whole world to see. "That's all of them," the old man said. "That's Brennan's Drift. That's what you killed. Remember it. You won't have a choice. I've made sure you won't have a choice." He turned the last light of Brennan away from the homeworld, level and unhurried, and pointed its prow at the open dark. "Don't follow me," he said. "You won't. You don't have the ships, and you don't have the certainty, and you'll spend the next 100 years finding out you don't have either. But just so we understand each other, Field Master, there are more of us. There were always more of us. I came alone because one old man and one patient ship was all it took to do this to you, and that should frighten you more than a fleet ever could. If a single human asleep in a box can take your wall and your fleet and your certainty in one night, sit and think, in the years you have left, about what the rest of us could do if we ever decided you were worth the trip. We decided you weren't. We sent one old man to take down a wall. Remember that too. And the last light of Brennan, one gray ship, one old man, one gun that had not missed all night, lit its drives and pulled away from the homeworld of Kasar Deep, slow at first and then faster, out past the broken fleet, out past the empty sky where 4,000 trophies had hung, out into the dark, and was gone. It did not run. Marsh would have been clear about that, if anyone had asked him. The hunters ran. He left. There was a difference, and he had spent the whole night teaching it, and the leaving was the last lesson. A thing that has won does not need to hurry away. It simply goes, when it is done, on its own time, the way the trophies fell. The hunters of Kasar Deep did not follow. They could not have, even if they had wanted to. The fleet was broken, and the will was broken worse. But that was not the only reason. The deeper reason, the one that lived in them ever after, was the one Marsh had built on purpose. They were not certain anymore. They watched the gray ship pull away into the dark, and 100 cruisers full of armed and able hunters let it go, because every one of them, down in the place that had no word, was asking the same question for the first time in 10,000 years. What if it is bait again? What if following is the trap? What if the dark is full of old men asleep in boxes, waiting to be carried home? They never found out. That was the genius of it, and the curse. They would never know. And not knowing, they flinched, exactly as the old man had promised, and the flinch spread, clan to clan, generation to generation, just as he had said it would. The story of that night was told on Kassar Deep for 1,000 years, but it was not the story the hunters would have chosen. It was not a story of glory. It could not be made into one. The old man had seen to that, by leaving them alive to remember the truth, and by reading the names so the truth could not be softened. The story they told was a warning, and it was the only kind of story a people who flinch can tell. It went, "There was a wall once, and we hung our kills on it, and we thought that made us large." And one of the kills was not a kill. It was an old man asleep in a box, and we carried him home and hung him on the wall and woke him with our own pride, and he took the wall down and read us the names of the dead and let us live, and we have never been certain of anything since. They never built another wall. That, in the end, was the thing Aldous Marsh had come to do, though he did not live to see the whole of it. He was 63 the night the cryopod hissed open above Kassar Deep, and an old man does not have 1,000 years to watch a lesson take. He took the last light of Brennan out into the dark, alone, the way he had come, and where he went after that the records do not say. Some say he found the rest of the humans and told them the wall was down. Some say he simply went on, ship and old man together, reading the names to the dark, counting Brennan's drift back one star at a time, until the cold took him at last in the seat that held the shape of him. Nobody knows. He did not leave a wall for anyone to read. But the dead of Brennan's drift came home. That part is certain. 4,000 trophies fell from the empty sky of Kassar Deep, across the long year that followed, burning bright lines into the dawn and the dusk, and among them, small and unarmed and 3 rows down from where it had hung, the colony tender that had carried families between the islands, no longer point down, no longer a trophy, no longer a story the hunters told to feel large. It came down on its own, the way everything comes down in the end, even the things you chain to the sky. And on a world a long way away, where the water was clear, and the mornings were bright, and the children went down to the islands, the people who came after Brennan's drift carved a single short line into a stone by the water, in plain letters, with no number under it, and no chain holding it up, where anyone walking past could read it. It said, "They thought it was a dead ship," and under it, smaller, in an old man's hand, copied from the log of a patrol vessel that never came home, but never, not once, in all that long, cold, patient night, missed, until the cryopod hissed open.